Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I'm Aaron, a 20-year Marine Corps vet. Man, I just have problems sitting still. I've been doing beekeeping, pottery. I've got a couple books of poetry and some other stuff. And today with me as my guest on this episode, I have Nikolai. Nikolai, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Nikolai Miller. I'm currently a 15-year Army veteran, still serving on active duty. I'm a military intelligence officer, but prior to that, I did about 10-ish years as an infantryman. I was in the airborne. I then became a recruiter, and then while I was at recruiting is when I decided I wanted to go ahead and commission over, and that's when I met Aaron.
Yeah, we were in the same fraternity, although I was alumni by the time he came around, and I was the president of the fraternity. And then just a few years later, he was president of the fraternity and did a really good job. Was recognized and awarded, and yeah, we became friends. He even did pottery with me, and so that was a cool experience as well. So. And Nikolai has the first rabbit hole for us to go down. He wants to talk about something, and we're gonna go. Go ahead, Nikolai.
All right, so today I was wanting to bring up dreams versus goals. And this goes back to a class I would teach as a recruiter to high school students. And it wasn't that I used it as a recruiting tool, but it was more just something I would do kind of like bono for whatever high school asked me to come in and talk, kind of like a motivational talk. And this will be much more short and condensed because I could probably talk for hours about it. And it's not exactly following the same format because usually I would have like a Q&A afterwards, or I would the only kind of recruiter thing I did was I would pick on random students and have them tell me what their dreams are or what their goals were, and then basically poke holes in their goals to make them realize it was more leaning towards still just a dream and not an actual attainable goal yet.
Mm,
And I actually enjoyed doing it because it technically wasn't recruiting, but my leadership thought it was recruiting because
there you go.
they thought I was going into these classrooms and basically making kids realize that their only option was the military. Whereas me personally, as a recruiter, I never wanted to recruit anybody that didn't want to be in the military. I felt like, around the time I was recruiting, I was seeing a lot of people come in that just didn't know what they wanted to do with life. And they were either using the military as a stopgap, which is perfectly fine because the average starting contract is 3 or 4 years. So it can kind of like, you know, push your timeline a little bit. But
Yeah.
um, I was more interested in recruiting, kind of more like a Marine recruiter does, where it's like, hey, I want to find people that are going to give the most to the Army versus just reaching a number. Um,
Well,
uh, but for my thing is, I always start off by trying to define what a dream and a goal is. For me personally, I always define a dream as something that could be considered grand or hard to achieve easily. So, like, this could be, a good example would be like, I want to be a millionaire, and that's extreme grandiose, but it could be just something that you've been saying to yourself for a long time, and it's just you have no idea how to get there or how to achieve what you have said you want to do.
yeah.
And then a goal is something that you are trying to accomplish with an actual end state, is how I define it. It's usually something that is smaller in scale or is something that you have really thought about what all you need to do in order to get to that end state. And typically, for me personally, that end state usually has a time with it. So let's say I'm trying to save up. I'm trying to go do this thing. I know I need to have X amount of money. That means I know that by this date, I need to have saved up this amount of money in order to accomplish that goal. And so when you put dreams and goals into that framework of definitions, I then like to tell people that a dream can then be accomplished by turning it into a series of goals.
Mm,
And when you do that, I like to say you are creating a roadmap. It's almost like you are drawing a line from where you are currently to where you want to be with various stops along the way or waypoints.
okay. I
And
like it.
yeah, and so the big key things to creating your roadmap is the first step. I always like to tell people is define the end, or clarifying the dream, because saying something like I want to be a millionaire. How do you want to be a millionaire? Where do you want that source of income coming from? What is your reason or drive to wanting to have that much money besides, or is there a different drive besides just having a boatload of money? Um, I mean, and it can be, let's see, what's the word? It can be as nebulous or as defined as you want it to be. It's just the key there is being truthful with yourself. So that way you know what goals are important. And if you're being truthful about why you want to reach a dream, more than likely you'll be truthful about what goals you need to hit and what are actually truly attainable along the way. The next step is to decide what goals you will need to get to the dream. And this is what I was saying earlier about waypoints is if you're honest with why you want to do the dream or what you will get from doing the dream, you'll be honest about what the realistic goals are. It's also like important to like start thinking about like the research, which is the next step of what you need to do. Cause like you might have a dream, but you might not know the actual way to get from where you are to there. And being honest with yourself in that situation will allow you to start really critically thinking about what all you believe will be the important steps along the way to finalizing that dream. But you need to make sure that when you're creating your roadmap, and I tell people all the time, just draw it out. Like, whether it's like a little stick figure or a little bubble, that this is me right here, right now. This is where I'm
Yeah.
at. And over here on the other piece, on the other side of the paper is where I want to go. You can create almost like a little timeline with tick marks of like, okay, I want to be a millionaire. That means where I'm at right now. I'm not a millionaire. So what money can I invest? What, when I say, think about the different ways of how do you want to, like, okay, I want to be a millionaire by going into real estate. Okay, well, then step one, I need to become a real estate agent. Step two, I
Right.
need to start buying houses or properties. What can I realistically buy? And then you start refining those goals down to where, like, I want to become a real estate agent. Then the next thing is like, I think I can realistically buy and purchase and maintain a property that's in the $200,000 range.
Right.
And then you can like use, and then, okay, I bought one house at $200,000 or property. And because I'm able to rent that out, I should be able to generate this much income. So within this time frame, I can buy a second one in the same, dollar amount, or I'm using the money that I'm making plus the money that I already invested to buy more expensive property. You can start creating a timeline of like, what all you need to do in order to get to that final
Right.
stage. And that's, the next thing, which is to, you need to research your route. Uh, you can't go in blind. And whenever you go into
Right.
things blind, it's like whenever you make a New Year's resolution, I want to lose weight, or I want to exercise more, I want to read more. If you don't realistically like look at what you have and what you'll need to accomplish that, you'll never get there. You'll
Right.
wind up quitting. I'd say it's one of the number one reasons why people, quit their New Year's resolutions. But people treat New Year's resolutions like a dream or a goal, and they don't really. Most of my friends that I've talked to about this all said the same thing, which is why I, came to start talking about this. Was that they would say I want to do something, and they would just start trying to get to it, and they wouldn't really look at what all they had to do to get to the final destination of where they wanted to be in life.
Yeah.
And like this research can start slow. Like, I use these steps all the time for myself. I used it to get to where I am right now, and I'm still evolving my roadmap. I'm still doing research
Right.
because eventually my career is going to end. And that means that if I don't have a plan, I'm just going to be rolling around doing nothing until I come up with a plan. So constantly do your research. There's nothing wrong with admitting to yourself that this is what I want to do, but I don't know how to get there. And it's not going to be
Right.
something that's going to happen overnight. Um, because typically, like I said, whenever I've seen people go into things blind, they usually don't succeed. Um, I would love to believe in Hallmark, movies where people, you just I'm going to
Yeah.
do this thing, and then they get out there and they do it. But it's just the way the world works. And it's 2025. You have a wealth of information online. You have it in your pocket. Whenever you have
Right.
a little bit of downtime instead of doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or something like that, which I am also prone to do every now and then.
Yeah.
um, just look into what is going on in the area that you are interested in. See what's going on. See, let's say you want to be a real estate millionaire mogul. Is the real estate market even doing well right now? Contact real estate agents. See how fast they're moving properties in the area that you're looking at investing in, or whether it's going to school. Figure out. This is when I really harped on to college or to the high schoolers because a lot of them would say my goal is, my dream is to go do this type of job. And they'd be like, so my goal is to go to school to do this. And I'd be like, have you done the research yet to find out what that job actually entails? And is it something that you're just thinking about the title of what it is? And is it does it actually like align with your morals and what you actually see yourself doing? Because it's just like in the military, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of jobs in the Marine Corps where you're like, that sounds cool. And then you get there and then you start doing it and you're like, wow, this is not what I signed up for.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And the civilian job market is exactly the same. So like if your dream is to work in a certain industry, I always tell people like there's nothing wrong with doing the research and then realizing, oh, this isn't actually something I want to do. Because
Right.
you've now saved yourself a ton of time. The only time you wasted, and I won't even say it's a waste, is that you found out that you weren't going to commit yourself to something, and then now you hate it. You don't enjoy it
Right.
because what is that old adage? If you do a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely heard that.
yeah, and I believe that that applies to every aspect of your life. You know, if it's like if the hobby, let's say, you know, I'm an avid cyclist, and if I hated just sitting there spinning my wheels for 2 hours at a time, I probably would have only done it for about a week and then given up on it. And then I would have uh, known that, or I would have wasted all the money buying because road bikes are not cheap.
Yeah. No, they're not. Yeah. Man, I don't know if we are going to come back to this or not, but man, you gave me so many things to think about already. Thank you for sharing that with the listeners and with me. And please continue to do that as we go, if it pops up again. But yeah, I was thinking about having like monetizing. Well, because you said what if your goal is to be a millionaire, and I thought about that, and I was like, there became a time. Actually, I just want to talk about the goals and what you're talking about versus dreams and everything else. It's like I, I was in the Marine Corps. You cross that threshold where you get to be a staff NCO, and you cross that threshold where you're like, am I going to make this a career or try to of 20 years, or am I just going to get out and work out in the civilian world? Probably make more money, but so you come to that that threshold, and you cross over, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go for retirement, and you focus on that. You focus for getting promotions and moving towards getting to 20 years and or more, right? And then so you make that decision, you go that way, and then I came to the retirement part, and I was like, well, I'm out of the Marine Corps now. They pay me a pension, and I'm paid for my medical problems they caused through the VA. And so, like, what do I want to do now? Hmm. Well, I don't know. I'm looking around. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, well, in my mind, I guess the only thing I had thought of was I think I'll smoke cigars in a cigar lounge and talk with other retired people, right? And
Yeah,
so that was my goal. I mean, it was a good goal. I like cigars. Cigar lounges are a nice place to hang out. And I was there during the day, and I'm looking around, and like there's people that are in their 80s, maybe one or two, and everybody else is out working. And I'm like, man, this isn't what I expected it to be. I didn't do any research, right? I just thought, well, every time I went to cigar lounge before then, there was retired people there in back in North Carolina, and hang out and have some good conversations. And so I thought that's what it was going to be when I got out and moved to Texas. So, but it wasn't like that at all. And I was like, well, maybe I need to find something else to do. So I went and worked on my master's degree, got that, and you finish with that, and it's like I'm like, okay, I know the path here. You graduate, you go get a 40 to 60-hour week job, you start at the bottom, and you work your way back up again. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't think that through. I don't want to do that at all. I did that in the Marine Corps, right? That's why I retired my first time at the age of 39. I want to, I want to do
yeah,
something else. I don't want to play that game. And, I didn't even wake up to that until I had my internship mentor, I guess. She was like, Aaron, you're in a different spot. I mean, I was, of course, probably 46. She's like, you don't need, you need to interview the people that you're going to go work for to make sure they're going to allow you to be creative and allow you to do what you have ideas to do. And I'm like, wow, that does change the game a little bit. I was like, well, where am I going to find an employer like that? I looked, I did some research, right? I looked it up online. I was like, what kind of jobs are out there for me with these qualifications? Is there anything part time, you know, or
Yeah.
anything where I'd be in charge of anything? And it's like, no, not really. I'm like, man, well, I guess I need to start my own business and be my own boss. And, 3 businesses later now, you know, and they're all kind of going, but I thought of too, as I reached that juncture and I realized I couldn't be in the cigar lounge, I was like, okay, now I got a chance again to trade all my time for a little bit of money. And I was like, I like having my time. And then, the paradigm shifted in my brain. It was like, millionaires have a lot of time. I'm like, man, I'm already living a millionaire's life. I mean, a lot cheaper, but I live cheaper in an RV and, travel around and stuff. And so I realized at that point, it was like, I am living like a millionaire. I get what I want when I want. I don't want a lot of big things. I don't need a new vehicle or a lot of the normal things that keep people pushing forward with their goals. And so I had to kind of I had to look for a paradigm shift in that. And the paradigm shifted. And I was like, wait a minute. I get to hang out with people and sit down and talk. I get to do coffee. I get to do lunch with somebody. I get to go and do pottery at people's houses or whatever the case may be. I got all this time. Like, I look at my calendar for the day, and the only thing today on there is podcast with you, you know,
Yep.
and I'm like, okay. And now I got to find things to do anyway. But so I thought about that. It's like it's all a mindset, a millionaire, being a millionaire or not, and and you're right, you got to have clear steps. And that makes me think of the SMART. Have you ever heard of SMART goals? Like SMART
Yes.
is an acronym. Yeah.
Yes, I have.
I thought I thought of that a lot when you were talking about goals. It's like I don't remember measurable time. I don't remember what they all stand for. I mean, I could look them up on my computer in a second, but anybody else can look them up too. As you said, look up SMART goals, and you can even print off a sheet that allows you to fill in the S, the M, the A, the R, the T. And I thought about this, and I'll turn it back over to you in just a second after this thought. But it's like when you do a goal, it gives you control. It gives you back control of your life. Like, okay, I can, and I did this for many years. I can just float on the streams of life and see where they take me. Oh, look, I crashed into land here. Let's see what this is. Or I can say, I'm going to go here. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to recon it. I'm going to do this and that and the other thing. And I'm going to set up and I'm going to help people or I'm going to make money or whatever your goal is. Instead of floating through life, you get some control. And especially with when you do a SMART goal, that makes me think of a book I read, Atomic Habits, as well, where he
Yep.
really talks about a lot of aspects of that as well. Smart, what is it? Not smart, Atomic Habits. Yeah. And I didn't read that whole goal. I didn't read that whole book, excuse me, because man, it was a lot. I like took what I did read and have applied it in my life. But sometimes books just have so much information. But anyway, what do you think about all of that? Any one of those things?
Oh no, it's you were like hitting the nail right on the head because like that literally just was what I was about to start talking about next because the last two steps for what I would teach people about creating a roadmap is the last two steps. The first one is be realistic of your abilities, wants, and needs. It's like the reevaluation, is where you've done your research, you know what you need to do. And it's kind of like tying back to what I was talking about, which then kicked you off about the SMART goals, is there's nothing wrong with realizing that like, your dreams have changed or your dream wasn't what you thought it was going to be or like you're saying like time versus money and that constant struggle that people probably middle income people and lower income people have the worst is time equals money and like you can be on the struggle bus trying to pay bills if your goals and dreams are more financial based, but are you living the best life that you want?
Yeah.
I feel like I'll just say Americans, but I think across pretty much every first world country is struggling with this right now of being in a consumerism mindset of I need to have the newest iPhone, I need to have the best computer, I need to have
Yeah.
the best car. I need to have, all these things. I need to be eating out all the time. I don't like cooking. And people will say like, I'm so broke. I'm so broke. And I even used to do this, I would like live paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, now that I've dialed back how much I spend because I'm being forced to just due to my current living situation, where
Right.
I just don't have the money to spend that I should in theory based on how much I see my taxes at the end of the year. I see how much I make. And it's now that I'm not constantly consuming, I've been driving the same truck for over 10 years now. I haven't had a payment in 5 of those years. That's really nice.
Right.
It allows me to have way lower insurance. I don't go out as often. I look for things to do that are more that feed my soul more than they feed, my you could say just human desires and wants. I'd much rather go
Right.
for a hike. I'm here in Colorado Springs. There's mountains surrounding me. I'd much rather
Right.
go up to like the Garden of the Gods and just like look at the awesomeness that is the world. It's free 99 versus going out and spending $100 at a bar, and I don't even get that drunk. Where
Right.
when I was in college the first time before I joined the military, like I was making poor decisions in my opinion. I choose not to judge others, but for me personally, going out to drink to get drunk is that's a waste of my time in my opinion nowadays. Because what do I get out of that? I feel really great while it's happening, and then I feel absolutely bad the following day.
Right. Right.
And I have less money in my bank account. And so there's nothing wrong with like realizing that like I want to do this. I want to, let's say your dream is I would like to have the maximum amount of time available to me to be able to go experience travel the world and see things. Do you need to do it constantly? Like that is weigh your wants versus your needs. Do I need to do it constantly? And do I need to do it first class each time? Or can I
Right.
do the work and the research and get the budget flights and go to pawn stores or thrift stores or Goodwills and buy all my travel stuff secondhand? Because I don't know if you've looked at the price of suitcases, but they're expensive. Or just I do backpacking every now and then, and backpacking gear is insanely expensive. Like one of my goals, or I guess just say dream, because it's still pretty far off and I have plenty of time to plan for it still, is to whenever I get out of the military, I want to fall off the grid, not permanently, but just for however long it takes me to walk the entirety of the Appalachian Trail, right? And that monetary, like I've already from the research I've done, the people that have done it successfully, they had to drop several $1,000s in gear all at once, and they have to make sure they have enough saved up so that way the bills are still being paid, so they have a house to come back to whenever they're done,
Right.
or pay the bill, whatever whatever they need to do to put everything in storage if they're a single person. Seeing that sticker shock, right, has caused me to. I've already started purchasing the gear, and I'm going to tell myself whenever that day finally comes, I'm not going to go out and buy a new backpack. I have a perfectly fine backpack that will do the job.
Right.
10 years from now, even though I bought it 5 years ago, 15 years from the date of purchase to when I actually get to hopefully accomplish this dream, that backpack will still serve the same function. I
Right.
don't need the
Yeah.
newest, most lightweight, piece of cool gear out there, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, I'm technically working towards that dream because every now and then, whenever I have a little bit of money and I find something that I know will be that will retain its value and its durability from when I purchase it now, whenever I get to do that, um, I purchase it now so that way I'm not spending several $1,000s or probably even more due to inflation.
Right. Right.
I think the last time I looked up the figures was like 2 or 3 years ago, and I think the average person I saw, like posting online about how much they spent. They do like a cost breakdown. A lot of people do cost breakdowns, and they would say, like, okay, they would have like their whole gear list, everything they needed for walking on the trail, plus food and everything, and the gear alone would be like $7,000, 8,000
Right.
because it's enough stuff to like get you from point A to point B, and it usually takes me about 4 months. So you're living out of a bag for 4 months. So you have to buy the higher end, nicer stuff that's going to last, being constantly used for 4 months straight. You can't just go to Walmart and buy Ozark Trail stuff and hope it makes makes the journey.
Right. Better bring a roll of duct tape if you're going to do that
Yeah.
to patch it up.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you were saying and for the goals and the dreams. Like, I read this in a book and I want to run this by you. Like, jealousy, because when we think about jealousy, we think about, wow, that's one of the 10 commandments. You're not supposed to be jealous. We also think about, how it's kind of frowned upon and people don't want to admit it when they're jealous. But I want to see it from a different perspective of I've heard that jealousy is a roadmap to figuring out what you want. And so when you're
Ooh.
young, when you're young and you're looking at somebody and maybe you're seeing their house or you're
Hmm.
seeing their family or maybe you're seeing their car, you know, and so you kind of got to refine it a little bit more because it's like, I want to have a car like them one day. May not be, the very best goal, because why? Because you're going to have a brand new model out every year, right? And so, but you can break it down and deconstruct it. I want to have a new car that has good technology and good tires, or could go off road, a big diesel truck, or something like this. And so you can refine it. But like when you look at somebody else and you see what they have, it can
Hmm.
help you set a goal. Especially when I was younger, man, people were like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "Well, set a goal." I don't know where I want to go or what I want to do. I want, and so I joined the Marine Corps, right? And see the world and become a man, just in Army, the same thing. You kind of got this nobility in it, and we're going to train you on how to do something useful. And so that was a good decision for me. But like,
At T-Code hand-forged knives, every blade tells a story, starting with my dad's 1965 fastback Mustang. The steel from iconic American cars, including that Mustang, lives on in each knife, crafted with precision and care. As a mechanical engineer, I combine history and engineering for unmatched durability. Every T-Code knife is hand-forged and comes with a lifetime sharpening guarantee. Want something unique? We offer customizations in design, etching, and coatings. T-Code hand-forged knives, where craftsmanship, legacy, and precision meet. Find us on Instagram at TCodeMFG, and let's build something that lasts.
I'm thinking of somebody else in that situation, and sure, I could tell them to join the military. And that's not a bad idea, but I would say look at the things that you're jealous of in other people, you know. And if you're jealous, I mean, a good thing to be jealous of is another married couple and how well they get along and how good they are with their kids. And you look at it and you're jealous and you're like, man, I want that. And you got some choices after you identify that jealousy. I can try and kill them and take their kids, obviously, right? Or I can start reading books and I can be a better parent than they are, And so, like, I'm going to authorize the good path of I'm going to learn and grow and dedicate myself to being a good parent, dedicate myself to being ready for my kids, you know. And so, but yeah, jealousy is a very simple way. I think I've heard of it used as a roadmap. What do you
Yeah.
think
No,
about that?
I 100% agree because, and I guess I know, like, you just like triggered something in my brain. And what ultimately got me to like where I am right now, and when what got me to start teaching this to high schoolers was it was jealousy ultimately. Like, I
Mm,
didn't really recognize it at the time. But a little bit about me, more background to me is, I love my family, I love my parents, I love my upbringing because I think it's allowed me to be a little bit more honest with myself, later on in my life. But I grew up very, very poor, and that's nothing against my parents. It's just, that's the hand they were dealt with life, and they did the best they could, and I think they did a fantastic job. But growing up, even though I was in a lower income neighborhood, it always seemed like all of my friends had more than me. They always had the newest toys. They always had their parents always drove newer cars. Some of their parents were able to help them out with, going to college, or like their parents, they may not have been, super rich, but their parents were successful enough to have a, business. So like a friend of mine could like go into, they already knew what they were going to do after high school. They didn't need to go to college. They already knew that they had a family business that they could go start working at. And hopefully if everything panned out and everything continued to go well, they would have a successful career for the rest of their life. And that's how that's how you start generational income is you create a nest egg that's sustainable, and then you pass it on to future generations, and hopefully do the right thing and teach them how to continue to make it grow. So that way, that's how every rich family becomes rich. Nobody starts off rich until the family is so rich that from birth they're guaranteed millions of dollars.
Right.
Not everybody's Trump. And so, like, think about that jealousy. I went, I, left for school and, started going to school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do because I wasn't realistic. I just knew I wanted all this stuff that my friends had. And so my
Yeah.
first time in college, it was a failure. I jumped majors 4 or 5 times. I honestly don't even remember how many times I jumped majors.
Right.
And after 6 years, I left college, and it was only a community college and with an associate's degree. You know, I dropped out of my high school dreams and joined the military because I finally like was realistic with what I wanted and versus
Right.
what I needed. And I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want a 9 to 5 desk job. I wanted excitement. I wanted a sense of purpose and I wanted excitement. And I knew the military would give me that. So I stopped what I was doing abruptly, didn't really tell anybody, didn't give anybody any heads up. My parents were very upset with me because they always thought I was the one that was going to go to college and be like super successful and be like, they want everything, they want the best for all their kids. But like my sister, she had no dreams of like going to like 4 year college. My brother wasn't anywhere close to college yet. And I was the one that was going to college for an actual degree. And they're like, oh, that kid's gonna go do something because my parents believed in that old American dream. If you send your kids to college, they will make something of themselves. And so I started doing the research, and I was like, the
Yeah.
military is a completely viable thing. Or like going back to what you were
Right.
talking about earlier, was where like I knew that I would get that itch out of me where I would be able to go serve my country and make decent money. So filling wants and needs, and I don't have to do it forever. I can do it because I did my research before I even sat down to talk to a recruiter. I already knew all the benefits. I knew the benefits of just doing 4 years versus 20 years. And I knew I wasn't ready to make that decision because I don't think anybody should make that decision right upon their military, entry of their military service. But I knew that coming out the other end, I was going to do just fine. And
Yeah.
so it was a no brainer for me. And whenever I made that switch, that's when things started. It didn't happen overnight, but the slow things, like I have more time to like go do things I enjoy because I have more money. I have a set schedule. I'm not working multiple jobs and going to school. I'm not staying up all night doing homework. I have a job, enjoy my job. And that was another thing was, like do the research of what you want, what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
When I went to go sit down with my recruiter, I knew exactly what job I wanted. There was no haggling or them trying to convince me to go do something else. I knew I was already qualified to do the job. I knew exactly what that job entailed. And I knew that's exactly what I want to do. I knew there wasn't going to be any like surprise of, like what I was saying, like this isn't what I signed up for.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
I didn't even intend because I knew like it was kind of more of an itch. I didn't realize how much I was going to love it. I actually intended on just doing my first initial contract and then either getting out or reclassing to a different job. Something that would have like
Yeah.
my at that time my roadmap was get in, get the jumping out of airplanes and blowing stuff up out of your system. Because even back then I knew it wasn't sustainable for a full 20 years without, getting out of the military and being really looking like I'm 60 by the age of,
Yeah.
35.
Yeah.
And so my plan originally was either get in, do it, and then get out and then go back to school after having, that 4 year break of being able to think about what I really wanted to do. So I wasn't wasting my time in college again or technical school or whatever it was. And have the support network whenever I got out at 4 years, or decide that I really love the military and then stay in for longer, but change to something else, you know, that would be easier on my body and actually have like post military benefits, like for jobs and stuff like that. But then I got
Yeah.
into the infantry and I loved it and I just stayed there.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah. Go ahead. No.
And I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say I didn't change my roadmap again until I became a recruiter and I started going to high schools and talking and realizing like, oh, maybe it's time for me to reevaluate my roadmap.
And it's funny how you're finding a path by going out there and doing something, right? So, many people, myself included, maybe yourself at some point included, where you're like, well, I hope something big and wonderful comes and hits me upside the head. And it's like the thing I keep coming back to and learning is by going out there and doing something, you find the path to doing something else. You know, people wait for, maybe a box to drop on their doorstep or something, and you open it up and it's like, you can be a private detective, or something, and it's like, well, I didn't really realize what I want to do in the army, as you said, until I was in the infantry, until I went to recruiting. And I went to recruiting and I was like, now I know what I want to do, and I think I run into that a lot with pottery creation as well, where it's like this one lady, I tell this story all the time in my pottery classes. It was in her home and she had finally made like a coffee cup vessel looking thing, right? And she's working on it, making the handle, and all of a sudden I try and tell them, listen to what the clay wants to be.
Mm,
And so
mhm.
she's in the middle. I'm so proud of her. She's been kind of struggling to make a coffee cup, making some other things instead up to this point. She makes this coffee cup. It's looking pretty good. I'm hopeful. And then she says, oh, I know what it wants to be. And I'm like, okay, what? And she squashes it flat and she says it wants to be a plate. And and she just like instantly squashed it flat. And I was like, ah! I was like, okay, well, I mean, it is what I said, and that's kind of the path in life, right? You're just like, I know what I want to be, and that's why I'm a potter and then a beekeeper and a podcaster. It's like in podcasting, I don't even know where that or any of these other paths are gonna lead me next, but I know that I'm going to pick up a path somewhere, But that was really to discuss your point. And now I thought of something else while you're talking. And this is just a really juicy topic. I'm just
Okay.
starting to think about scarcity mindset, the
Oh, yeah.
scarcity mindset. And, I want to hear from you on this too. But like the thought I ran to a guy the other day. I mean, it makes me sad to have like five rabbit holes I want to go down and like to have to pick one, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. I talked to a guy the other day and he's like, I don't have anything. I don't have disposable income, so I'm just gonna sit here and be bored. And I was like, I don't know if that's true. Like, so I kind of have been giving out this assignment and I've done this particular assignment on the podcast a few times, like get a pad of paper and a pen or something to write with and just start listing the things you have, right? Just start, maybe even you might think you might just need one piece of paper and you start listing the things you have. And what I try to do to give them a hint is just start at like your right pinky toes toenail and you work your way up to, your hair or whatever, the top of your head. And, there's 10 million things right there. And then use your eyeballs and look. And I'm looking and I've got like a water bottle, I've got a mouse and a computer, I've got an RV, I've got bananas over there, I've got grass on the ground. I don't have to do nothing, it grows. I got bees in a beehive doing their own thing. All I do is supervise, right? And they're making honey. I've got the wind blowing, I've got the sun shining. I mean, right there is like more paper than there is in the world, right? And so
Mhm.
it's like just start there, and you have a lot more than you think. And I don't know how that exactly applies to the scarcity mindset, but those thoughts came at the same time. But the scarcity mindset story I want to share was I had a warning popping up on my truck, but I also had to go on a trip with the RV with a fifth wheel. And so we're on our way to California, and I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe the warning will resolve itself. It's saying reduced power. I didn't notice anything when I was just driving normally, any kind of reduced power. So I was like, okay, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But then we get the RV hooked up and we start going, and I'm noticing it doesn't go faster than 45. And I've got an F-250 with a diesel engine. It Normally, I could go 75 and set the cruise control with my fifth wheel on there, right? But now it's not going above 45, and then it breaks down. So I want to do a cost benefit analysis on this. If I'd have went and had the fuel pump checked when I had the reduced power originally, $500. When I'm in the middle of the road on the side of the I-20 waiting for two tow trucks, And my vacation at California actually ends up being in Abilene, Texas. And, I don't want to talk too bad about Abilene, but I'm surprised it's still there because it's only barely holding on from the 70s and 80s. But anyway, so it's not your ideal vacation destination. And, after we pay for truck repairs and staying in an RV park for the week in a place we didn't want to, grand total probably $15,000 it cost
Ooh.
me. Oh, so $500 or $15,000. But with the $15,000 deal, I had the wonderful feeling of, you know what? It's probably not that big a deal. I won't get it checked out because I'd have to spend money. And like, no, I'll just wait. I'll just wait. It'll probably be okay. And you can see how that turned out, right? The scarcity mindset is, I don't want to spend money now. I'll see what happens and spend money later. And there's a big difference in the price. I'm going to get it checked out now versus I'll just wait and get it checked out later. And that, to me, I realized in that moment, that was the scarcity mindset in a nutshell. So what do you think? There you go. I gave you plenty
No,
of stuff.
yeah,
Go ahead.
it is. I do the exact same thing. I in fact, I was, talking about like how great it is to not have a truck payment, right? For the last 5 years. I do the same thing with my truck because it's, like I'm going to use a semi bad word, but it's a shit box now. It's old. It's been in several accidents and it doesn't run quite as nice. It does the transmission's a little bit old, the engine's a little rough. It start her up in the morning. It's really cold here in Colorado, and she doesn't sound as good as she did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I do the exact same thing because I have a check engine light and it's been on for a while. But as soon as it came on, I pulled the codes and I looked it up. The two issues are they're not detrimental to the truck at all. It's just that I need to replace the gas cap.
There you go. Yeah.
It's got an emissions leak. It need to replace the gas cap, and then there's something wrong with the oil pressure gauge sensor. The engine doesn't need that in order to run smoothly, but it's tied into the system to where for I guess it's a backup for people that just don't check their oil.
Right.
Don't change your oil, it slowly burns off, and then you lose oil, which means your oil pressure goes down. But I change my oil regularly. I pull the dipstick out and I check it, and I make sure that it's good to go because it's an older truck. It's got 170,000 miles on it. I can't be
Yeah.
driving around for 10 months without doing an oil change anymore. That'll
Right.
destroy the engine. And both of those parts, the gas cap is like $6, and the oil pump. The only reason why I haven't changed not the oil pump, the oil sensor, is because
Right.
it's like a $45 part, but I have no tools here to change it.
Right.
And every time, talking about scarcity, I go back to Texas where my entire garage full of tools are.
Yeah.
On some leave to go see my wife. I don't want it, like, scarcity isn't just time or isn't just money. Sometimes it's time, and I don't want to spend a whole
Yeah.
afternoon. I might only be home for 4 or 5 days. I don't want to spend a whole afternoon replacing a $45 part on my truck. But I do know
Right.
that it's got a timer on it. Eventually, it could morph into something worse, or like I
Yeah.
get a little too complacent. I don't check my oil as often as I should, and it's going to be the exact same situation that you just had, where I'm broke on the side of the road, and I'm really going to be kicking myself in the butt because I didn't want to spend $60 on parts and just do it myself. And now
Right.
I'm having to take it to a dealership or probably in my case, probably a shade tree mechanic, and still spending probably a couple of grand because something blew on my truck.
And yeah. And I found out all kinds of resources to help me with vehicle based scarcity mindset. And that is like you said, I think you call it a shade tree mechanic, but like
Mm-hmm.
you can get a traveling mechanic in your area, just come to your house and fix almost anything on your vehicle. They'll bring all the equipment they need, they jack it up and do what they need to do, and it's lower cost than taking it to a repair shop. But yeah, so that's something, a resource that I found is out there. Well, I want to go back to something else you said too, unless you
Okay.
have something else.
I mean, no, like time or scarcity theory. It's interesting because like I agree with you. Like it's weird because like it can apply to anything. Like like tolls, right?
Health,
Yeah, health. Yeah,
health,
like we're both in the military. How many times did you get told just to like, hey, don't worry about it. It's not that bad right now. Just push through the pain.
right. Here's a Motrin.
yeah, here's some Motrin, here's some, Ranger candy, and, just go about your day, man. Just take it and deal with the pain. And while there are positives to that, I've very much learned how to manage my own pain without the use of medication. But I'm 39 years old, and I have the knees of a 60-year-old, my lower back. It hurts to I can touch my toes, but it hurts really bad in my lower back. I have arthritis, a degenerative arthritis of both my shoulders. I have TBIs, and it's all because the very first injury I had in the military was I tore my LCL on my right knee, which is the
Mm,
connective ligament on the outside of your knee. And it was a small tear. It wasn't a complete tear. And it was within the first year of me being in the military. And I went to I was on a mission. It happened. I went over to my team and there's like, hey, there's something wrong with my knee. I think I landed wrong on this airborne operation we were doing. My knee hurts really bad. And he's like, well, suck it up, dude. Like, we got stuff we have to do. We'll get the doc to check you out later. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Cause we're doing stuff. And I understand like the mentality of like, if at the end of this I'm gonna get taken care of, fine. And I started,
right,
moving around on it, and I realized, started managing the pain in my head, telling myself it wasn't that bad. So then by the time I could have gotten checked by the doc, I didn't go get checked by the doc because the pain
right,
was manageable. Until 2 months later, we were doing a platoon run, and I was literally running like I had a peg leg and crying because my knee had swelled up to the size of a grapefruit and was so much pain. I physically could not bend my knee a millimeter. And so by the time I did go to get seen by a doctor, like, hey, yeah, there's nothing we can do to fix this. We can send you to PT, physical therapy, and get you taken care of. And they basically just rebuilt the muscles around that side of my knee. So that way I didn't have to rely on that ligament being at 100% anymore. And that was 14 years ago, and I still have knee pain. And I
yeah.
wish if I probably wouldn't be in as much pain if I had just taken the time to go talk to doc 10 hours
Well,
after the incident.
and I think that's an interesting intersection between money and our health. It's like they're in the scarcity mindset, they're connected. Like, well, and
Hmm.
especially now that you're still in the military, so you can go get checked out. But it's like talking to your doc, and he's handing you a couple Motrin, and you're like, I've done the research, I've looked it up, I've talked to doctors, I think I need surgery, you know. And you have to kind of take responsibility for, not you in your situation, but a person has to take responsibility for their health. And then on top of that, it's like, well, that's going to cost you $10,000. Well, I don't care what it costs. I like walking, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're in the military, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not $10,000, but there's a lot of red tape probably.
Hmm.
Well, we want to look at how long your career's going to go to see if we want to do it or separate you, and you start this whole process, cascading process perhaps. And I know when I was a young sergeant, I hurt my foot a lot and broke my shoe off my foot driving my motorcycle and getting my foot stuck between the foot peg and the curb. And it bent my foot back and broke my shoe off and hurt some bones in my foot. And they were like, well, we could send you for an MRI, but you're a young sergeant and we're not sure that it's worth it. And eventually, I don't know who made that decision, but I'm glad they made the right decision. They sent me down to get an MRI, and then they ended up putting a cast on it, and I haven't had a problem with it ever since. But it's a matter, it's so many little junctions like that when it could have went the other way. But it's a little bit harder, even though it might be free while you're in. It's still a little bit harder to kind of navigate that process to get something like that fixed. But in my mind, it's like I think that's something I take very seriously now. I mean, I got the VA and I go get my medical stuff for free. So I could go in there and get triaged. And I do quite often. Actually, I think I've probably had physical therapy probably 10 times in the 10 years since I've been off. When something starts hurting, that's where I'm not in a scarcity mindset. In that, I'm like, but money's not involved, right? So I'm like, my elbow's hurting a little bit, it's not when or whatever, it's not straightening out right. Something hurts. I'm going to go get it checked out. And then I'm going to get physical therapy. Or my back hurts and I go to the VA. And at least probably one time a year, they give me at least 10 to 12 chiropractic sessions for free for me. And so I go out town, and so it's like I'm taking that very, very seriously. But when it comes to money in my truck, it's a blind spot. Well, it's not anymore, but it was. But for
Hmm.
so many people, their health is a blind spot. It's like, well, yeah, I can take some pain pills. Well, now I got to take oxy to deal with it. Well, now I'm going to take heroin to deal with it. Well, and on and on they go down the spiral instead of maybe I'll get a doctor to check it out. Well,
Yeah.
that's going to be expensive, and they say no and they continue on to other things. And so, yeah, that scarcity mindset kind of is our health problem as well.
Yeah, it's weird because like I have my own little rabbit hole on that one. That's a completely different topic based around health, and like listening to your
Do it.
body. I'm a big proponent on out of all the health around my body, the one that I can always, maintain myself. I don't need the military's help at all is foot health. And I started researching probably 5 or 6 years ago, like how do your feet connect to like the rest of your body and how important are they to like your everyday functioning. And I was blown away
Yeah.
at how much just like regular like shoe technology is. Like I'm sitting here, I'm next to my shoe rack, at the foot of my bed, and like things like this. Like I have, a dress shoe, right? And just
Yeah.
this little, not even an inch heel is enough to throw off the
Oh,
way
yeah.
your body balances itself. So like I went through. I'm pretty sure you saw some guys like this in the gym when you were still in the Marine Corps, but like the 5 finger toes, the
Yeah. I've wore
shoes.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, I love those. And it stinks because like I have all this knowledge of like how important it is to allow your feet to feel the ground and be connected to the earth. And I'm not even talking about like a metaphysical aspect. Like there is plenty of research on that too if you want to go down that little research hole for yourself. It, like I started wearing those, and then I started, wearing there's these two different sandal companies which they both of
Yeah.
them are designed off of sandal designs from indigenous different indigenous people.
Right.
One and I realized like how I started switching to more minimalist shoes, and then I switched to those
Right.
sandals. And I'll plug these if anybody's listening wants to like look them up. One is called Zero shoes with an Xero, which is I like to tell people about if they're more like conscious about like what people are going to think about what they have on their feet.
Yeah.
Um, and the other one is Earth Runners, which is the more indigenous sandal design, which is more stable. And like believe their company believes more in the metaphysical aspects of like grounding yourself to the actual ground through like I think they like run copper wire through the sandal straps, and they have like a little copper plug on the bottom of the sandal. But I wear them just
Yeah.
because they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And I remember when I switched, and this happened very first because I started reading up on like the benefits. Like back when I was at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, I was the heaviest I'd ever been, but like good heavy. Like I was like 225 pounds, and I was running and trying to get up to being able. I didn't care about like going and paying money to be in an actual marathon, but I wanted to like prove to myself because at that time the job I was in was all about carrying a ton of weight on your back and moving insanely far distances by yourself and like supporting yourself
Right.
100% out of the bag you carried on your back. And so I was like, I bet if I could get, I'm 225 pounds of pretty dense muscle. I bet if I could run a marathon at that weight, walking will never be a problem. So I started
Right.
running, and I was like, man, I'm having like a hard time running because before the military, I only weighed 147 pounds. I could run like the wind.
Right.
And so I wasn't really impressed with my runtime. So I just started looking up like how to improve. And I saw like the beginnings of the research of saying like all these shoe companies are giving people these insanely thick, heels is causing people to not run the way humans are supposed designed to run, where you constantly, if you put a shoe on that's super cushioned, all you're going to do, you're going to change your gait so that way you're heel striking because it's more comfortable. And that
Right.
throws off your whole gait, and even though your feet feel better, it causes damage in your knees and your hips. And so then that led me down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, if I want to get back to the original, like, what I need to do, it's like, oh, you need to have zero drop shoes. You need to learn how to run so you have a midsole strike. And then that led to like, and it's just like it was rabbit hole after rabbit hole to like eventually years down the line, I was just researching how important it was that your feet, if you're not having a good day, especially now that I'm older, I definitely listen to my feet more. If my feet are telling me like, hey, I can't feel the ground, like I'll start realizing I'm not as balanced as I normally am.
Yeah.
And I'll notice like I wear a fitness watch. I'll notice that like on those days, my heart rate will be a little bit higher. My stress will be a little bit higher. And I think it's literally my body is trying to tell me like we're not comfortable. We can't feel the ground. And whatever it is you're doing, you like, and I notice those days I'm more prone to just sitting down all day.
Yeah.
And that leads to lethargy, that leads to not working
Right.
out, that leads to all kinds of things. And so whenever I made that change, now I still wear cowboy boots because, from North Texas and I like cowboy boots.
Yeah.
But like even then, like I'll wear them, and then like I'll have days where like I'll put them on, and I think I'm going to wear them all day, and immediately within 5 minutes, it's like, nope, this is a poor footwear choice, and I'll switch to one of my minimal pairs of shoes, and I'll immediately feel better within 5 or 10 minutes. Just feel massively better. And and I think that like ties back to like the scarcity and like tying like your health. No doctor knows your body better than you. They might know the cause of your symptoms, they might know the technical term and the treatments, but I hate it whenever a doctor tells me I'm not feeling the symptoms I'm feeling, that the symptoms I'm describing don't match up and link up. My body is telling me this, good sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I want to, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, go
This
for
is
it.
a rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole that I have been living in for about 3 weeks. I just finished the book, Born to Run. I think
Hmm.
James McDougall, something like that. And so we are exactly tracking somehow without planning it that, yeah, I just ordered some five finger shoes. I've been running in five finger shoes ever since I was still in the Marine Corps. Last couple of years in the Marine Corps, I started using those. And just to try them out, see what it was about. And, then I read this book, Born to Run, and he talks about the exact things you're talking about. He talks about because he was having problems, he was having injuries. He's like, I'm running 3 times a week like I'm supposed to, but I'm having all these injuries, and all the doctors tell him was, well, time to take up bicycling. And he's like, but it's got to be another way. People have been running since the dawn of time. And so he launches this quest, and it's a wonderful story. And anybody and everybody I would have read this book because it's just a good story. The storytelling is on point. But the thing I was surprised by was they did this study of all the running shoes with long distance runners, and they found something really crazy. And that is the more money you spend on the running shoes, the more they hurt you, the more often you will be injured, right? And you're right, barefoot running is where it's at. I mean, we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I've been throwing these numbers around, but sometimes numbers get jumbled in my head. But it's like we got 15 muscles and 25 tendons in our feet.
Yeah, it's
And
something
if
crazy like that. Yeah.
And if you wrap your foot in this running shoe and tie it tight, you're eliminating all of the wonderful benefits of those muscles and tendons, like this natural springiness, this natural weight reduction, impact reduction that our feet do. And they actually found another thing they found was that and you alluded to this, that we push down harder with there's cushion in our shoes. We push down through the cushion to hit the ground, and we actually increase the amount of weight in our stride when we wear cushion running shoes,
Hmm.
because our natural instinct is to push down harder to hit the hard ground. So we're pushing extra. So instead of 12 times our body weight, which our feet dissipate easily and instantly, now we're pushing down even more than 12 times our body weight on each side of our body every time we take a stride in running shoes, right? And so, I mean, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just so interesting and insane that when I was in the Marine Corps, I thought, well, I've been having injuries. I'm going to spend $120 on a pair of running shoes, and never noticed that they actually hurt me more often. But looking back at the data now over the course of my life, I'm like, I ran in five finger shoes for like 15 years. I didn't have one injury. I'm like, whoa, why did I not get this data? Right. And then I read this book, and I review the data of my life, and I'm like, I get injured 2 or 3 times a year. I've twisted and sprained both my ankles 3 to 5 times each. So nobody has to tell me you get injured more in running shoes, right? But still, the running shoe industry, thicker soles, you look taller, all these benefits, and people are like, "Yeah, I'll spend $200." And it's like, how much do you like walking? How much do you like running ever again in your life? It's like,
Yeah.
so I'm with you, and I know we got to wrap up. We're really close to the end, but I had to say something on there that we
Oh,
completely
sure.
agree on that. So yeah, foot health and barefoot and scarcity mindset. And they've caught on. Those sandals aren't cheap. Those five finger shoes are more expensive than any other running shoe at this point. Maybe
They
not,
are.
but
Well,
most.
they're pretty
But
expensive. I think my last pair I bought was like $120 or something like that.
yeah,
But I bought them like 5 years ago.
yeah. I just bought a set on Amazon this morning for 135. But I checked the reviews, made sure sizes fit, all that stuff. Yeah, so it's interesting that the cycle, well, hopefully the cycle goes back that way completely again. Because I care about people running,
Mhm.
and I care. We're made to run. We're born to run, and that's the theory he discusses, and the data he pulls together is that you're meant to run and run minimalist, barefoot kind of running, and you can run all day. And all kinds of people are running over 100 miles in the worst conditions with barefoot running. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, but thanks for joining me today, Nikolai.
Oh, you're
Man, so
welcome.
much good information. Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
enjoyed this. No, no, that was the thing. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was a good time. And thank you for everybody else that joined and listened to this podcast or will listen in the future. And I hope you get some takeaways. I hope you get, just like me and Nikolai, I hope you get some light bulb moments where it's like, oh, wow, that makes sense. So thank you. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.